Okay, this is the introduction. By the way, kind of fell asleep, so oh well. Alright, well, here. Introduction. This is the first book I published since a great tragedy happened within my family. Perhaps someday I'll write a book about it. But life goes on, and for me, the struggle to expose Islam continues. Although this is a work of science fiction, it is all inspired from my study of both the Quran and Hadith. Halfway through this book, the lead character, Muhammad Abdullah Rahman, sees no hope of escaping an excruciating death out on the Black Rock Desert, and knowing that he has nothing to lose, he ingests LSD. It's unlikely that his experience matches a real LSD trip, but if you're familiar with Alice in Wonderland and the certain things Muhammad taught as revealed in the Hadith and Quran, I just felt compelled to write an Islamic version of the Lewis Carroll children's story, this time called Allah in Wonderland, also known as the 100th name of Allah. But it's an Islamic take on Alice in Wonderland for grown-ups, so viewer discretion is advised. I know it will infuriate Muslims if they come upon it, but again, most of what is revealed in the story is inspired totally from Islamic sources. I just took out from the Hadith and Quran, making a Muslim Alice in Wonderland salad, if you will. I'm sorry if it offended, but again, since I see Islam as such a threat to the free world, I felt it had to be said. To me, the sexual and irreverent nature of such an LSD story is far less a threat to the peace of the world than the Quran and Hadith taken seriously. Again, I felt I just had to write it using Islamic imagery to pull it off in Lewis Carroll fashion. Okay, this first story I'm about to read in the Black Rock Redemption, also known as Allah's New Black Rock, is called Pork Ribs. Sandy Prince, who is now known in his mosque as Muhammad Abdullah Rahman, was driving up Nevada's Black Rock Desert to test a bomb he made. A bomb he was planning on detonating with himself in his car while plowing into a Reno casino. Mr. Rahman tried jihad of the pen in an effort to see if he could win Allah's favor by defending Islam on the internet that way. But when confronted with the fact that from the Hadith that Muhammad truly did infer embryos go through a 40-day blood clot phase, proving the Quran chapter 96 really meant blood clot instead of clinging leech-like substance, the way all Muslim scholars were trying to say it meant now. Well, Mr. Rahman discovered that the only comeback in his defense of Islam was to resort to personal attack and saying such things as, "You know nothing about Islam," or if you only knew the original Arabic," or "If you only knew the classical Arabic," or "You are a loon," or "Get out of your mommy's basement," or "Dude," or "Take your meds." When an infidel asked the question, if the Bible is not the book that makes people the book, then what are the before scriptures you, a Muslim, are to come to me for my reading of them, like Quran 1094 commands you to do if you are in doubt about the clear signs Quran? All Mr. Rahman could respond back with was, "I don't know. I just know that the Bible is not the before scriptures because the Bible is corrupted." Such a lack of a powerful answer to such a question tormented Mr. Rahman no end. He found himself responding more and more to the notion of the sun truly setting in a muddy spring by admitting that he believed that there truly was a time the sun actually did set in a muddy spring, and that the stars really were located in the Earth's atmosphere to be used as missiles on Satan and his jinn if Satan and jinn tried to spy on Allah. But that Allah probably said B, and now the universe was far bigger and more grand than it was in the time of Alexander the Great. The man of the Quran says, walked so far west and so far east that he found the places where the sun rises and sets. Mr. Rahman more and more found himself confessing that when Allah wrote the Quran, Allah later changed the reality of the universe, making it only appear that the Quran was written by a very backward-thinking caveman. Due to such a confession on Mr. Rahman's part, he started seeing the internet abbreviations of LOL and equivalent of it appearing on the computer screen for the 10,000th time. It all became just too much for Mr. Rahman. So the pen of jihad was dropped, to be substituted by the sword. It was now time to display once again what Islam was becoming famous for: a Muslim fulfilling Quran 911 by killing and being killed in the cause of Allah. A car hooked up with bombs and going off in a crowded casino on a Saturday night seemed perfect for Mr. Rahman. Thus he continued on to the Black Rock Desert for his Muslim lone wolf bomb testing. In order to not catch the attention of authorities, he had his neighbor's Springer Spaniel dog with him in the passenger seat. If pulled over, he had used his taqiyya, line for Allah, to tell the officer that it was his sister's dog. A feeling of unease entered Mr. Rahman when he wondered if infidels actually had some kind of Megan's Law alert for their dogs. The thought that they might sent a feeling of unease into him. There would be no way he could detonate the bomb with a dog by his side, for he was told that to die with a dog meant to not make paradise, and instead end up in the fire. I'll bring it back. The Kafir neighbors next to me will think the dog just got lost, and will reward me handsomely when I say I found it. The Kafirs are blind, not wise, he said to himself with a yellow-toothed smile. Dogs were almost as filthy as pigs in Islam, but not nearly the worst of creatures as non-Muslims, Kafirs like Quran 98:6, had told him and all the other Muslims who were truthful with such scripture. The dog, not knowing that the driving neighbor abhorred him, seemed to be smiling as it stuck its head out the window and had the wind quickly bring him the odors of sagebrush and other Nevada fauna to pass by his snout. Knowing that a dog probably wouldn't be the only cover to not only make him look to not make him so jihadi and fundamentalist, Mr. Rahman pulled over into a 7-Eleven in Sparks, Nevada to shave the beard. There was no mirror, so he waited to catch his reflection on his SUV mirror. He was terrified to admit it, but he looked a lot better without the bushy beard, for it was quite white in color now. But even though he was in his 40s, the stress of work and prayer on a prayer rug 5 times a day was beginning to weigh heavily on him. The fact that he'd have to get up at 4 in the morning and head to his mosque to not make others suspicious that he was out of Islam was quickly taking its toll on him due to a lack of good sleep, making it look like he was in his 60s. He only had been a Muslim for 10 years. Why can't I collect a welfare check like all the other brothers in belief? He said to the dog by his side. They don't work, and they think I'm selling out by working for such an evil system as America, the country that supports Israel. The dog looked at him, for it was the first time he said something since the kidnapping. Realizing that Allah's apostle Muhammad carried on a conversation with a suicidal donkey that told him it didn't like women, and realizing that there was a passage in the Quran about ants not only communicating the same way humans communicate, but ants keeping up on human affairs to the point where they would know who Solomon was, King Solomon, along with the existential threat Solomon and his soldiers' feet posed to their anthill, Mr. Rockman started thinking the boring children's story of Dr. Dolittle was right on. So much so that Mr. Rockman began confiding things to the dog he wouldn't dare communicate to a human, especially not a fellow human. Although it was a gamble that made him nervous, Mr. Rahman remembered the saying in the Hadith that if you have a dog or a picture in your house, angels of Allah will not be able to enter your house. I better end it here.